Reason number 5 that God probably exists is that he seems to have visited us. The last 4 videos, I've really been talking about God in this general way that might apply to any theistic worldview. This is the first and only one that has a distinctly Christian flavor, but it's a really important discussion point because it's really the thing that might separate the Christian worldview out from all other theistic worldviews. And it's the claim that 2,000 years ago, something happened on planet Earth that was truly unprecedented. Nothing like it had ever happened before, and unrepeated. Nothing like it has ever happened since. That means everything. This event reshaped the world that we know and laid the foundation for humanity to progress as it has. It is the definitive event of planet Earth. And the claim is that 2,000 years ago, Jesus, this Israeli carpenter from a little town called Nazareth, a nobody from nowhere, began to make the claim that he was uniquely divine, that he was God himself walking among us with the power and the authority to rescue this lost planet, this broken humanity, and restore us to our right purpose and to a relationship with God. And he said and did things so shocking and so distinct that he divided the world around him. I mean, he brought teachings about the way humanity is supposed to function that was not like anything that had been heard up to that point. It didn't really reflect Greek or Roman thought. I mean, it had its roots in historic Judaism, but it didn't really reflect the flavor of Judaism that was around at the time. It just seemed to come from nowhere. And it was so distinct that the world was divided. Lots of ordinary poor people close to him were convinced that he really was who he said he was, and believed and followed him. And the powers of the time, the governments and authorities, were threatened and had him killed. Now, so far, it's an interesting story, but there's nothing radical in that. The radical thing, what marks this out as a world-changing claim, is that this Israeli carpenter didn't stay dead. That he verified everything that he'd already said about himself by absolutely overthrowing death. Now, that's a tough claim to make as the foundation of a new faith, of a new worldview. That's a tough claim to make because it's something that could be refuted with facts. And those making it would know whether or not they were fabricating it or not. It's not the type of thing that you could really easily be unclear about whether or not it really happened, right? So you could start some new movement with an ideological claim that really wouldn't have to have much to do with facts. You can make a claim. You say, I'm starting a new religion where everyone has to be nice to each other and where chocolate ice cream is the best kind of ice cream and every Monday is Ice Cream Monday. And those are ideas that really aren't rooted in any kind of factual claim. And so people who agree with you would gather to it, and you might successfully start your new religion. But if you wanted to start a worldview that was founded on the idea that the impossible had happened, that something physically had taken place, well, that's much tougher because anyone around at the time who had facts to the contrary could just tear the whole thing apart. If you're going to make the claim someone has risen from the dead, well, if it's not true, all someone has to do is produce the body, and the whole thing comes apart. But more than that, when you're upholding a claim about facts, something really happened, if you're put under serious pressure and you know that it's not true, you're likely going to cave. You're likely at some point going to hold up your hands and say, okay, we made this claim, but if you threaten my life, for example, if you threaten to kill me, well, I'm not going to stand for something that I know isn't true when my life is on the line. None of the early supporters of this claim did that. All the people closest to Jesus who had been closest to the actual events were prepared to die, and largely did die for the claim that he really did this, that he really rose from death. And on the basis of this claim, the church just exploded. Christianity exploded. Within weeks of his death and alleged resurrection, thousands were calling themselves followers of this man, of Jesus. Now we got to check ourselves when we hear something like that. We got to check ourselves that we take people who lived in a different era seriously, that we take their intellect seriously. C.S. Lewis talks about, I'm always quoting C.S. Lewis, I know, talks about chronological snobbery. This idea that people from other time periods weren't really as smart as us, weren't really as intelligent or developed or well-rounded or whatever else as us. They were ultimately gullible, and they were easily tricked by things that we would never be tricked by. That's foolish. The ancient world was full of brilliant thinkers, scientists, and philosophers who were meticulous in the conclusions and the processes by which they came to their conclusions. There were historians around at the time who were really good at getting to the bottom of things that really happened and differentiating between fact and myth. The ancient world was alive with skepticism and careful thought, and it was in that setting that this claim that someone had risen from the dead really took root. And again, it wasn't just an idea that was being peddled, it was a claim about facts. Now, the evidence for this actually happening is not scientific evidence. There couldn't ever be scientific evidence for something like this for a few reasons. One is that for something to be scientifically verified, it has to be repeatable. You have to be able to set up lab conditions around it and make the thing happen again. And the whole fabric of this claim about Jesus and who he is and what he did, it's all bound up in the idea that it was a once only thing. It was this totally distinct, unique event that never could be repeated. It was a once for all deal. So it can't be repeatable. If it's true, it can't be repeatable. If it's repeatable, it's not true. And then anytime someone was to claim that God had interacted with humanity, you would expect it to be impossible for science to pick it apart, because science deals with the natural. And so as soon as you make a claim that something supernatural has happened, you'd expect science not to have access to it. There's not scientific evidence. What there is historic evidence. There is the testimony of people who were alive at the time. There is this wealth of well-preserved records and written testimony. There is the explosion of this movement all around a claim that should have been easy to dismiss. Those things are historic evidence, and historic evidence is different from scientific evidence, but it is still a serious form of evidence that all, in every sphere is taken seriously. The only reason we are slow in our culture to take this evidence seriously is that we seem to have already decided that it's a religious claim rather than a historic, factual claim. Which is a foolish way to ever approach any piece of evidence, to decide what type of evidence it is before you've actually assessed it. unfortunately, it's been decided that the Gospels are primarily religious texts, and not historical texts. Again, that's a foolish way to engage with any piece of evidence. The right way to engage with a piece of evidence is to approach it as unbiased as possible and to allow it to inform you what type of evidence it is, and to judge it on its own merits. And I'm quite convinced, as are millions and billions of other people, that if we approach the evidence in an unbiased way, the historical evidence for what really happened 2,000 years ago in Palestine, that if we approach it with an open mind, there's compelling evidence there that the impossible really took place in that little part of the world all those years ago, that something happened there that really rightly redefines history. And if you're prepared to look at that with an open mind, I think there are really good reasons for a person to be convinced. Not only is there a God out there somewhere, not only is the universe fundamentally personal, not only is humanity really tied to something transcendently true and trustworthy and divine. Not only is it all happening out there, but all of that has somehow come here to us. We have actually this planet has been invaded by the divine. And that, more than anything else that I've tried to discuss in these little videos, that is a reason that I think you should believe God exists, that he has come near to us and is still coming near to us day in, day out. People are encountering this Jesus and finding themselves saying, yeah, he's really met me and he's really alive. And he wants to do that with you too. So maybe, I don't know, maybe sometime down the road I'll do a few more videos. I think it'd be interesting to maybe pick apart 5 reasons Jesus probably is God. I think there really are good reasons for that. Maybe that's for another time. But start with those 5 reasons, and let's have some discussion. Thanks, guys.